All right, this is Oral Lafori of the African Dream. Well, today we're here in Washington, D.C. at the VOA studios, and we're having a quick chat with Sonny Side of Sports. And hopefully we're going to get to know more about Sonny when we're done. How are you doing today, Sonny?
I'm doing great, Oral. How about this great World Cup studio?
I know.
I love it.
I love it. It's crazy. I feel very lucky to have walked into a studio like this, you know. But yeah, it's good to be here. Now, people are asking, who is Sonny Young? How long has he been working with the Voice of America?
Started in 1988, so I've spent the better part of a quarter century at the Voice of America. One of my mentors here was a guy by the name of Barry Mon, who basically sort of bequeathed his sports segment to yours truly. Barry's show was called Sports Journal. And I think one of the things that Barry said to me when he kind of handed it over, he said, I can teach you a lot of things, but I can't teach you passion, that fire in the belly. And I've always had a passion for sports.
I can tell.
I've loved sports. I grew up playing a half dozen different sports as a youngster.
Interesting.
And I still do a little running today, and I love sports. Yeah.
That's interesting. Anyway, so Sonny, tell us, how did the name Sonny Side of Sports came into being?
Sonny is my nickname, and in case you're wondering, my mother said I was a very happy baby,
Nice.
so she named me Sonny. And so Sonny Side of Sports is a play on my name, but also in some ways it's part of my philosophy. I do try to promote positive stories in the sports world and encouraging stories when possible. So I think it is. I think it fits.
Now, speaking of positive stories, one of the most exciting and biggest sporting extravaganza is going to be the World Cup, which is right there behind us in Brazil 2014.
Kicks off in June,
Right.
typically a month-long tournament.
Right.
And from an audience perspective, from both your audience and my audience, 5 African teams will be in Brazil. And why don't we run them down? We'll have Ghana will be there, Nigeria, Cameroon, which has the proudest World Cup pedigree of any African team.
Right.
Also Ivory Coast, and Algeria is the 5th African team. And if those teams sound familiar to our viewers right now, well, yes, those same 5 African teams all qualified for South Africa 4 years ago.
Right.
So kind of a deja vu moment. But well, let me throw it to you this time, Oral. I know you're from Ghana. Do you like the chances of the Black Stars in Brazil?
I think they have a very positive mental attitude. A couple World Cups back, when Ghana, went to represent the nation at the World Cup, we had that mentality of, oh, at least we qualified.
Right.
That's good enough.
Right.
But now they're going in with a whole new aggression, a whole new, much more positive, heightened sensitivity, where they're like, this time we're going to do better than we did last time. And, even though last time we did awesome, we're trying to kick it a notch up and do much better. So it's always positive to go into the World Cup with a winning mentality for, especially for African nations. We should have gotten past that point where just qualifying and going there and playing is a feather in the cap. Now we have to go there with a winning mentality. And we're going to win the World Cup.
I agree with you. I think the Black Stars of Ghana definitely have a winning mentality.
Yeah.
Haven't watched a lot of them this year. However, I did see that match in Kumasi when they played Egypt. And I was amazed at how good Ghana looked in that match. I think they crushed the Egyptians. I think it was like 6-1. But one thing that really impressed me about the Black Stars, Oral, is their speed.
Yeah.
They're one of the fastest teams I've seen.
I agree.
And they're going to play the USA in their opening match in Brazil. And I think the Americans have their hands full. I mean, the Americans, physically, they're a strong team.
Right.
I don't know how they're going to cope with Ghana's speed and passing ability. And I think that's a very tough group. Ghana has to get out of a group that includes not just the USA, but Portugal and Germany, 2 of the European powers. But I think Ghana can do it. I do. I think they can get out of that first round.
It's good to hear a non-Ghanaian speak so highly of the Ghanaian team. So if you're listening to this and you're from Ghana and you like the Black Stars, then Sonny Side of Sport is rooting for you. But, I mean, let's be frank. Sonny is from the US of A, so obviously he's going to be rooting for his home team. And if you follow World Cup history, then you know the Americans haven't had it very easily playing the Ghanaian team in the last couple of World Cups.
In fact, I was actually at the match, Oral, 4 years ago when that match went to extra time when they played the Americans.
Right.
I think it was in Rustenburg, and great match.
Yeah.
And Ghana won in extra time. But that was the second straight World Cup that they knocked out the boys in red, white, and blue. But I do have a very soft spot in my heart for Ghana.
Yes.
And if you want to put me on the spot, I think Ghana and Nigeria are the two strongest African teams going to Brazil. Nigeria, they're the reigning African champions.
Right now.
A lot of young talent on the Super Eagles squad. But that said, I think Ivory Coast has a chance of getting out of the first round. They're in. Compared to Ghana, they have an easier group for the first round of Brazil. Still have some great players: Yaya Toure, Didier Drogba. He'll be back probably for his last World Cup. Indomitable Lions of Cameroon, proudest World Cup pedigree of any African team. I think, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think this is their 7th World Cup appearance. So they will not be intimidated by the whole World Cup atmosphere. Algeria from North Africa. I don't give them much of a chance of getting out of the first round, but, these are the 32 best teams in the world.
Right, so anything can happen. Nothing is impossible. But, you can't discount experience. When a team is highly experienced, they have a lot going for them. But with that said, Sonny, tell us, when the World Cup begins in Brazil, what would be your highest expectations, especially for the African teams?
Well, from a historical perspective, Oral, I don't believe two African teams have ever advanced out of the first round. Now, I know we've had one African team several times move out of the first round. I would love to see
more than one.
Two African teams reach the knockout stage in Brazil. So, I'd love to see Ghana go through. And Nigeria. I think it would be, that would be incredible if 3 African teams were to get out of the first round. I would just like to see 2. I think that would be a huge sign of the progress of African football in recent years. And what better stage to do it than
the World Cup?
Than the World Cup.
I can't agree. I can't agree.
But I think it's going to be a great tournament. Nigeria, as we mentioned, has some really good young players. Not just the Nigerian team, but all the teams going to the World Cup. They're starting their World Cup preparations for real.
Right.
We're less than 100 days from the tournament, and they're in full preparation mode.
Sonny, tell us, are you going to be able to make it to the World Cup in Brazil this year? I had to put you on the spot.
Fingers crossed, Oral. I'm hoping that I'll be in Brazil, but still a few details to be worked out. So I'm on the fence. I'm kind of on the fence, if you know what I mean.
I understand. Now, let's go back to African sports. We know it's a given that soccer is like the passion of the entire African continent. You've been doing, coverage of African sports for years and years. Take us back to history. Tell us one of the most memorable coverage that you made of African sport, irrespective of, the discipline. And what mark it left on you as a reporter.
Well, I'll tell you, Oral, we've been talking African football here, and one of my first real memories of the impact of African football was on my first trip to Ghana. And I've made 2 trips to Ghana, and I attended, this was back in 2002, I went to the Accra Sports Stadium in your nation's capital,
right.
And I went to a World Cup qualifying match between Ghana and Nigeria. It ended in a draw. I think it was 1-1 was the final score, but I think what really stood out for me from that game was the crowd at the stadium. It was a sold-out crowd. There were literally fans seemingly hanging from the rafters of the stadium. And I thought, how did they get so many people into the stadium?
Right.
And the atmosphere was just wonderful. The fans cheering and singing, and there were fans with face paint and mascots, and I think that it really hit home for me how passionate African soccer fans are when I attended that match, and I realized, how much it's almost like a religion,
right?
In Africa. To
is.
say that, soccer, it's almost like it's a religion.
If you take Brazil out of the equation, one of the continents where soccer is a religion is Africa.
Yes, I would agree.
People are passionate and crazy about it. Now,
that was a big moment, and I have to throw in one other memorable moment for me. About the same time, it was a year before that trip to Ghana. I went up to Canada, of all places, to cover the World Track Championships, and I was able to meet Haile Gebrselassie, awesome. the great Ethiopian athlete. And I think I've posted that photo more than a few times on Facebook and even Twitter, nice. Of me and Haile. And back then, I did have more hair on my head. I had a lot more hair, actually. But yeah, Haile was he's been a great ambassador for international athletics, and it was a real thrill to meet him.
That's interesting. So, Sonny, when you look at, your listenership and your viewers across the African continent, where would you say the Sunny Side of Sports gets the most listeners from?
Our primary audience, in terms of feedback that I get, Nigeria is our biggest audience. We have our most listeners there. I get probably most, if not many, of my emails and letters from Nigeria. Ghana, also one of our big audiences, and I should mention Sierra Leone. That's we Voice of America actually has a 24/7 FM affiliate in Freetown, and at my Facebook page I have quite a few fans in Freetown. Shout out for Liberia,
yeah.
Our friends in Monrovia. If you're listening, we really appreciate your support, and I appreciate your support. And shout out for George Weah from Liberia. He's actually visited Voice of America. It's been about 10 years, but that was another great thrill to meet George Weah.
I can imagine.
And, so yeah, I would have to say West African countries are probably where we get most of our listenership, mm-hmm. but we also broadcast to South Africa, where we have a bureau in Johannesburg.
Right.
And the Voice of America is heard across the continent, not just in English, but in other languages such as French, Portuguese, Swahili, Amharic, Hausa.
Yeah.
It's because you worked here that it's kind of what do we say, a United Nations of broadcasting.
Indeed, it is.
And you'll see people from all over the world.
So, Sonny, before we leave you, let's end this with the World Cup and tell us, who do you think? I know you're going to think I'm going to ask who do you think is going to win the World Cup. Well, guess what? I didn't lie. Who do you think is going to win the World Cup?
I look at it, in terms of where it's being played. And home teams always have the advantage.
Right.
Let me put it this way. I will be very surprised if Brazil or Argentina, one of their neighbors, a South American team, I should say, if Brazil or Argentina is not in the final of the World Cup, I'll be very surprised. So, I'll have to go with the Brazilians. And I'm just basing that on their proud history. They've won 5, more than any other team. They're playing at home. They're going to have so many fans cheering for them. They've got Neymar. Mm-hmm. That said, we have Messi for Argentina, who has never won a World Cup.
Right.
And so he has something to prove. I think in some ways, until you win the World Cup, you're not really considered the greatest player on the planet. And, many say Messi is the greatest player in the world. If he lifts that trophy, that pretty much says,
That'll complete the circle for him.
And that guy that's right over your shoulder too. Who's that? What's his name? Ronaldo. Right there he is. See, right there, Ronaldo.
Yeah. Number 7.
He probably has something to prove too.
I know, right?
And so he might even do it against Ghana. Unfortunately, I don't know. We hope not. We say go Black Stars.
Well, folks, you've been listening to Sonny Young of the VOA English to Africa Sports section, and if you listen to the VOA English to Africa a lot, then I'm sure you're familiar with the Sportylicious Sonny Young. This has been a Ralphoria of the African Dream, and we've been talking to Sonny Young. It's the sunny side of sports.
Great job. Great job.
Thank you.